So let's go over some of the most useful things that I've found in the last couple of months in regards to starting a project and sticking to a project. Once again, one of my biggest weaknesses, apart from making projects too big, is just keeping to a project till the end. So, one of the first things is project scope. Basically, how big your project is. Some of my ideas in the past in regards to project size, one of the first one was buying an asset on the Unity store for an MMO and then just make an MMO by myself. Ridiculous idea. Another one was a sort of interactive book for the phone. So like D&D, you even had dice for a fight. And I had, what was it, 5 different endings for the first chapter, let alone the rest of the book. I finished the first chapter and stopped. Of course, I could have reduced that project to 2 endings of the first chapter, and I had my reasons for doing it. I thought the story was kind of cool. That said, that project was way too big. That said, what I did learn on that one is you can use the animator to have a state machine focusing on different ways to apply a text based approach, which was a really unique approach to using the animator tool in Unity. That said, once I finished the prototype, I put that on my folio and then moved on to something else. So always learning, never finishing. With that, one of the most important things I feel is making sure you reduce your scope as much as possible. In my case, the biggest approach to doing that was thinking of the smallest game I could think of and then making a good version of that, in this case in XR or VR. So Asteroids was the one I picked because it's one of the first games, it's one of the simplest games, and it turns out the prototype worked pretty well. And of course, prototyping is one of those key elements of finding the game or finding the fun in the things you're trying to do. So, oddly enough, flying the ship and shooting things is really quite difficult, but that's kind of the point. So it's kind of fun flying your ship around, trying to shoot different asteroids or the ship. I find shooting the ship happily frustrating in regards to it's kind of fun. If I miss it before it gets away, it's kind of frustrating but enjoyable in a way. And then once you finally get it, it feels really good. And you get a power up or a better weapon for doing so. So, in a way, finding the fun in a prototype is very important. And as much as I was kind of determined to make this game a work because it's so small, it did actually work out to be an enjoyable experience, or I could foresee it being an enjoyable experience with enough things. For example, in my case, I had some friends say the 3 asteroids was good. I didn't agree, even though I'm making the game. But once I put the UFO in, coming across the room and taking a shot at you, you had to navigate missing the missile, missing the UFO, trying to dodge the asteroids, and that made the game. And I do find Unity very good at being able to update assets very quickly and easily. So even if you had a gray box or, like, let's say a first pass of the assets, which is important to me because as much as a gray box is useful, in my case, I needed to see something that looked similar to the ship or similar to the asteroids to make it better, to make it feel better because I'm a very visual person. But that first pass was more than enough to get a feel for the game. And then I can just constantly update those assets without editing anything else. So it's pretty great how it does that. I find Unreal a lot more complicated with asset creation, but as soon as you override the FBX or the texture in Unity, it's updated and it's great. So I find that really good in Unity. So in this project, one of the benefits of this that I chose for, the reason that I chose Asteroids for, and I need a different name, of course. I'm just using Asteroids, Asteroids-like, if you will. So this whole experience needed a ship, 3 different sized asteroids, so big, medium, and small. The UFO, and some pickups, I guess you could say. So very small amount of assets, very small amount of coding or assets to code. Of course, I'm going to do a VR version because there's not that many headsets that actually have pass-through. There might be more in the future, of course, but VR is another experience. So creating a space environment with a planet over the side and all the stars. I think would look pretty cool, and just sort of have a fixed room size that works for VR, I guess you could say. The next thing to focus on is project passion. This one's important because it is very easy to stop being motivated to finish anything. So making sure your passion is important enough to get through the difficult parts that every project will have. When you start, it's amazing. It's fun. You're seeing things pretty quick, and getting into it is pretty easy. But once you start getting to the intermediate and probably definitely the polished stages, things get really, well, things get more difficult. So your passion for whatever the project is very important to be able to get through the project. Having a smaller project allows you to finish sooner, which allows you to keep being motivated. But there are times that programming something annoying, debugging is frustrating, the asset doesn't look as good as you want. It's extremely easy to lose focus or lose motivation or gain procrastination. There are so many things in any project that basically allows you to stop. So making sure that you have passion in the project is extremely important. And in my case, I have a few things that I'm using kind of as a hack to make sure that I get through the project really well. So one is I like learning things. So one of the reasons I've failed finishing projects is because I like learning so many things. And therefore, I will learn something, learn a new skill, make a new asset, learning that approach, learning sculpting, learning unwrapping, learning texturing in Substance Painter, programming, you name it. I'll always do something and then stop because I want to move on to the next thing I want to learn. So learning is a key thing for me. Therefore, looking at a project to learn from, whereas, once again, finishing a project is like a whole project is the learning curve. Now, I never really thought about that until recently for some reason. And therefore, using that approach to hack my brain to make sure I keep going is a very useful approach. So when it comes to you, find what you are passionate about and then utilize that to hack your way through all the difficult things. So in my case, it's learning. I also love VR and XR. I always have. When I was like 12 or 14, I went to America, and they had a VR device there. The frame rate was so slow, I couldn't see the thing I was trying to hit, and the game was over before I could. It was a boxing game, so that was a good waste of $5, but the idea was amazing. So I've been looking forward to that. It took longer than I had hoped, but I got there in the end, and now I think the Quest 3 is kind of like the first real headset that's kind of interesting. So learning new things, or learning things that I haven't done before, which is the second two-thirds of any game development, and also XR and VR. The problem is the XR VR space is pretty difficult now. Studios have been shut down by Meta. Horizon Worlds has moved on to mobile. I think that part is actually a good thing, because a lot of those experiences were very Robloxian, and Robloxian experiences are mixed quality. There are 100% good experiences in Roblox, I think, and once again, Horizon Worlds as well. But I do think a lot of the discoverability is on the things that hack kids' brains rather than quality experiences. I grew up with the original Nintendo, the ColecoVision, the Amiga 500, and those had to be good games. So I'm a bit old school in regards to the quality of games that I would like to play, and trying to embed that into the games is very important to me. So we'll see how that goes. There's also like, and I did look at making games on Roblox, but the fact that the company takes 70% of your income is not great. And Steam is better. I think they're at 30% now. Epic, I don't know if they do VR, but like they're about 15 to 20%, I think. Everyone sticks on Steam though. Meta, I'm actually not sure. I'm assuming it's around 30%, maybe 20. So these are much better ecosystems. That said, the discoverability is kind of more onto you, rather than the gambling or addiction approach that a lot of people in Roblox use. So yeah, not looking forward to the marketing stage, but we'll see how it goes. And in my mind, the original Blizzard, not the Activision Blizzard, but the original Blizzard is kind of my goal, where taking good ideas from everywhere and creating a game that is highly polished. And as a solo developer, of course, that will take longer to make the game, but hopefully the result is a much better result. So people will enjoy your game, they'll tell their friends, they'll buy that. That's how you make a good game now. And again, that's important to me, and I'm looking forward to building those elements that, like, how can I create small, tight elements to a game to make people say that's cool, or that feels good, or it sounds good, stuff like that. I'm assuming the audio is going to be one of my weakest points. That's one area I've never really delved into. That said, when I get to that, I hope to learn at least enough to sort of make a good experience. Or perhaps get a friend or outsource that. But again, money's a little bit tight just to get me through this process. So we'll see. I might have to learn even more, go through that process, but we'll see how that goes. Next up, we have project planning. Now, this is very important. This is really important in regards to, part of it is scope, like how you're applying the scope for your project, and focusing on the MVP, making sure the basic core game is enjoyable, maybe looks good. So if you want to get that far, you can, and having a release of a game, like a minimum release of a game. Now, this is called the MVP, the minimum viable product, but making sure the scope of your project is sort of like an MVP and only that. It's very easy to look into ideas and cool ideas and make sure or try to put those into the game early on. But I think it's very important. And for this project, pretty much one of the only ones, for this project, I've looked a lot at making sure I focus on the MVP separately from the feature creep. Now, for that, I've got my project plan. I use Notion for this, of course, Anytype, Obsidian. There are tons of tools for this. Trello, if you don't want to do like really deep docs, for example. But I find Notion really good because you can actually move around priorities really easily, as you find that, okay, this is more important or this takes less time, things like that. So I do recommend coming up with a system that works for you. So for me, I really like this approach now. In the past, I've used sort of like a calendar thing. So each week I would set up tasks. So I would have like X amount of tasks to do. And by the end of the day, and I do this with this approach as well, at the end of the day, I will set up the tasks for the next day. And I'll get into that in the next point. But the main thing here is making sure that you have the tasks that you are going to do, having the tasks that you've done, just to show that you are progressing. And this is the approach that I've looked at this one. So let's have a quick look at this. So up the top, I have my random tasks. So these are tasks that I've thought about and put them up the top just quickly, or things that don't fit into other categories. Under that, I will have two columns. One is the general assets or things that I'm working on. So at the moment, I'm working on the UFO because I broke it, and the ship. So I've got some things I want to do with that. Under that, I've got big bugs. There is one problem that I'm having with the XR experience, where the world space in Unity is at a slightly different angle than the scanned room for the XR. And that kind of breaks a lot of things. So the UFO goes at a different angle. The HUDs that I've used are sort of a bit off. And if I can figure that out, it hopefully might fix a lot of things. So that's a big bug there. At the moment, I've actually done quite a lot of things in regards to all of the other assets. So, once again, in my case, Asteroids is a very small game, and all I need is basic weapon types, some ships, basic laser, asteroids, the UFO took a while to do, and pickups. I've also got the game UI, and of course, general things around that. So I can put that in like any category that doesn't fit in everything else, I can put down the bottom there. So again, looking at that every now and then is really quite good. So I've done some work already, and that's great. So this up the top here used to have more things. So asteroids, weapons, and all those sort of things, getting them through, but they're all not done, but they're done enough. Once again, the MVP is done enough to move that onto and focus on some of the key things that I need to work on. On the right there, we have just the assets that need to be made. So the ship is very far along, and then cleanup or polish, depending on how you look at it, will be important on that. Again, with the asteroids, same sort of stage. UFO is at the first pass, so I need to clean that up a lot. I've got the avatar or the character, and I'm working on that in the stream. So if you want to see me figure that out, feel free to join in. And then, of course, the UFO alien will be there as well. The key thing, especially with any project, is the feature creep. For me, or the scope creep. Some people call it that, or the most recent version is called scope creep. For me, anything that is not in the MVP, so anything that doesn't count as the UFO, the ship, the asteroids, the basic lasers and stuff like that, will fall under the feature creep section. As you can see, it is not small. Some of these things, once I get to it, will probably be its own page in Notion. So when I start looking at weapon types, I'm hoping there's many different pickups that you can pick up once you shoot the UFO. I also want to do customization or upgrades to the ship, because customization is cool. So faster thrusters, more weapon based. So when you get the super powerful weapons, I want those to be limited, because being super powerful will make the game too easy. But one thing I thought of yesterday actually is, can you use points to upgrade your ship? So you can either go for points as a focus, but you have a simpler ship, or you have a more powerful ship that you would have to sort of play longer for to get the same score. So I'm kind of interested to see that as an approach. If you have any thoughts on that, feel free to jump in the comments. I think it's interesting, but maybe it's not. The personal opinion of games is sometimes very different from players' experience, so I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on that. Point system is definitely in here. I do want to teleport, because the original asteroids had like a shape, had like a blip that would turn up somewhere in the screen. You can't do that in your room because you might blip behind you and then you don't know where that is. So a lot of the ideas of game mechanics has to be updated, changed, completely modified in a 3D space when the original is 2D. I find that really fun. I find that sort of problem solving really interesting. So again, trying to make it fun, trying to make it engaging, trying to make it appealing is a very important stage of pretty much any game. So in my case, how do you make a forward teleport work so you can sort of blip through an asteroid for a second? How do you, and I'm still figuring this one out actually, how do you have a warning of the UFO coming from somewhere in your room? So if a UFO comes from behind you, is the audio enough to figure that out? Or do I have to do a visual guide, like an arrow? Like when you get shot from behind, you have arrows in a lot of games. But you can't do that because, well, you can do that with a headset. But ideally, I don't want to have UI elements in the headset. I want them in the world. So how do I do that? I'm still figuring that one out. And in a way, that's why I'm doing this game. I want more VR games. I want more XR games. I think it's a whole new platform, and the kinds of games that you have access to potentially aren't even really being explored. So what does retro games look like? How can you upgrade them in interesting ways? How can you make For example, a TV game using a headset that has full 3D experiences. So traditional games, but full 3D, that you can actually have things come out of your screen. There are so many cool ideas that I have in my mind. My project list is not small. So, once again, solo developer, you're limited. So, doing things fast is good, but a lot of my experiences are big. So, if I can get a studio going with the millions of dollars that I make in the apps that I make, I'd like to start a studio. And again, looking at reference of other games, which ones work well. For example, cards is a very common approach to customizing a roguelike, for example, which I could do. Or I could just have a ship shop, or garage or hangar, I guess you would use. And in regards to that, you spend the points on each upgrade, whichever one you want to. There's skill trees. There's all sorts of approaches to upgrading anything in games. So figuring out the best one for this game is definitely a key part of it. And so thinking a little bit or a lot, depending on the feature that you're looking at, is very important. But again, because of the project scope, you're keeping within the boundaries of a reasonable project size. So putting those two together is extremely important, and I found has saved a lot of time in regards to making this project. Next up, we have countering choice paralysis. I think any project at any stage, in my case, starting is always very difficult. The choice paralysis is always a key thing in regards to slowing you down or stopping you completely. One thing I have seemed to avoid this time is that because of some of the techniques that I'm approaching. One of the main issues with choice paralysis is, say, for example, it's like starting is one thing, but after I finish a feature, I will spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the next best thing to do is, and I will procrastinate a lot before starting it, even once I've decided it. So one thing I found that's been very beneficial in regards to that approach is at the end of every day, I will set up the next day's tasks. So by the start of the day, I already know what I'm trying to do. In regards to the choice of that, I've found understanding that any option is good as long as you're doing it. So if you've got a good project plan, you have set tasks that are the right ones, regardless of what you do. If it is not the right one, it should be in the feature creep section. So doing that has allowed me to always do something and keep moving forward, which has been like fantastic to move forward. So anything is good as long as I'm doing something, even if it's just the top thing on the project list. The other side of that is not adding too many tasks, and this is why I think feature creep is a very useful category, because adding too many tasks will start looking overwhelming. You'll look at that and it's like, oh, that's too much work. I'll never finish it. I don't want to do it, and then stop. So once again, 2 or 3 smaller tasks are very, very good. And if it's a big task, then that's the only task that you need to do, so you can focus on that. Or a few small tasks and one big one, things like that. Another tool that I've used in both game development and life in general is if you have choice paralysis and you've got multiple options to do something, flip a coin or roll a d20 to choose for you. It's probably not going to be a wrong thing. If you're having choice paralysis, all of the choices are fine. Otherwise, you wouldn't be paralyzed on it. So get a d20 once again, or have 2 choices and then flip a coin, and then the choice is made, and then do that. It takes a lot of the stress out of it. You'll probably have fun or enjoy doing that, or feel like you're doing something. So I found that quite useful in a way. I had a friend a long time ago whose literal whole life was based on a coin toss for a while. Last but not least, we have a warm-up. A warm-up is a really interesting approach that I'm sort of getting into more recently, which comes down to any skill, to be honest. With game development, I find a warm-up either in asset creation, so quickly make some assets, do a warm-up in a sculpt or a hard surface asset, or programming, for example. So looking at these polish elements, and some of them are very, very small. So looking at these tasks that you've made the previous day, to improve or yeah, to basically improve your experiences is really, really useful. The simple things get you going, and then once you've sort of warmed up, you can start looking at the bigger questions. It is much easier to start with small tasks rather than jumping into something really big, and probably more frustrating. Doing so will, once again, get you demotivated, start making options like getting online, going through tutorial hell, or looking at Instagram and TikTok for the rest of the day. Anything that keeps you off that ecosystem and continuing to work is a really good thing to do. And I find the warm up is kind of crucial in regards to getting started with whatever you're working on. And it's very easy to find those by just playing your game and thinking, what can I do to polish this quickly? Let's wrap it up there. But hopefully some of this has been useful. You can use some of the techniques that I've used, and hopefully we can all get our projects finished and released out there in the real world. Like and subscribe if you found this useful or feel that others might find it useful. If you want to come across to Twitch, feel free to ask any questions about game dev, asset creation, life, the universe, and everything. I'm very chatty in the chat if anyone's asking any questions. So feel free to come along and ask any questions you like. Have a good day, and catch you later.